I've said in the past Q4 sucks. So that raises the question, what are Qs and why does Q4 suck? Qs, short for quarters, are what you get when you divide the year up into 3-month chunks. I thought that actually all of the video game publishers had their quarters and year ends all lined up, but I actually finally did the research, and it turns out that's actually not true. Ubisoft and EA end their fiscal year at the end of March. So their Q4 ends at the end of March in a year. Activision actually lines up their fiscal year with the calendar year. So December 31st is their Q4. And Microsoft has their fiscal year end at the end of June. They've at least divided the year up into logical places. So no quarter actually goes across a calendar year. We'll assume that, and there's no one hiding out there that actually has something different. We'll go with that just for simplicity's sake. That gives us 4 quarters. There's a quarter that is January, February, March, a quarter that is April, May, June, a quarter that is July, August, September, and then finally a quarter that is October, November, December. Let's talk about each of those quarters, what's good about them, what's bad about them, why you may or may not want to launch your game in a particular quarter, and why you often end up with a lot of games seeming to launch in a quarter that I don't actually consider very good. Let's start with the quarter that we're in, which is October, November, December. For EA and Ubisoft, this is Q3. For Activision, this is actually Q4. This is actually their last quarter. This is a great quarter for a lot of reasons, but it does have some challenges. This quarter, of course, includes Christmas shopping. So if you are a game that is coming out in this current quarter, October to November, December, you have the opportunity to sell really big in Christmas shopping season. In a world of digital sales, that might not matter quite as much as it used to, because you're getting less and less grandma going into a Best Buy and buying the game that the salesman tells them to. Now you're getting gift cards and other ways of selling things. But it's still a pretty important quarter. There's still a lot of money spent in this quarter. So that's why if you are a big game, this quarter can be really important because it's an opportunity to hit that holiday season and really sell. That same opportunity can be a problem for smaller games. Because there are so many giant games trying to come out in this quarter, marketing is very expensive. You are fighting a lot of noise of other games trying to be heard in the holiday season. So if your game isn't very big, coming out in this quarter, Q3 for EA, can be a problem because you might just get lost in the noise and forgotten about while the bigger, more important games are picking up lots of sales. The other thing with this last quarter is it's not a full-sized quarter, at least as far as retail is concerned. Unless you're out basically in front of Black Friday in the States, you kind of don't really get to be part of holiday spending, which means October, definitely great. Very early November, still an opportunity, but the second half of November and December, you're kind of in this blackout period that happens around the Christmas time. And your sales can actually be hurt by being in this quarter in that case, because you're not really part of the holiday spending season. With gift cards, there might be an opportunity to pick up a whole bunch of redemptions right on Christmas Day as people take their gift cards, run over to their Xbox or PlayStation or Steam account, type the code in, and buy your game right there on Christmas Day. But I still think that what we've got here in this quarter is a quarter that's kind of bifurcated with the holiday shopping season in the first half, and then sort of a blackout kind of holiday resting period after Black Friday. And that takes us into the beginning of the year, this quarter that is January, February, March. It similarly has a blackout period. As we come off of Christmas, we have a period of time where people don't tend to spend as much money. They've potentially spent a lot of money going into Christmas, and they're feeling like, well, maybe it's time to take a break. Maybe it's time to have a New Year's resolution of playing less video games or going to the gym more or whatever. In January and February, games tend to sell a little bit worse. This is what I've often referred to as Q4, and because it's Q4 for EA, and that's one of the reasons why I don't think it's a very good quarter. The other problem with this quarter is that because it comes right after Q3, which can be a very noisy quarter for a lot of publishers, it can be hard to get the marketing arms of that publisher to pay attention to you because they're focused on the game that's coming out in November, and it's not until that game comes out that they're turning and pivoting to focus on you. So your ability to market can be quite restricted. You're potentially paying for ads up against much bigger, more expensive competitors who are coming out before Christmas while you're not actually coming out. So the noise can be so high that your marketing campaign can be very much drowned out. If your fiscal year actually ends at the end of December, like Activision, you run the risk of getting an organization that doesn't want to spend money on a game that's coming out in the next fiscal year. So what you could end up with is a game that's coming out in this quarter, getting all of its marketing compressed into the last little bit of its campaign, which isn't necessarily bad if it's done intentionally, but because people have been distracted, the intentionality of that campaign can be a little suspect. You've seen this happen with a lot of Bioware games that have slipped into this quarter. Their marketing campaigns are sometimes a little bit rushed. The attention that should have been spent on them, the money that should have been spent on them, gets siphoned away on the EA games that were coming out a little bit earlier, or the money just doesn't go as far because it's being spent in a very expensive quarter, that holiday quarter that's right before this one. That's not to say that this quarter is complete garbage. There is this concept of essentially the rebound game, and I've seen this happen a couple of times. The idea here is a really big game in your genre comes out in that holiday quarter. People buy it and people play it, and then now we are 3 months later and they're done with that game, but they're interested to pick up another game in the genre, but a different game. So I've seen this happen most with shooters. So someone picks up Call of Duty in November, and then come March, they're looking for something else, but still a shooter. I've seen games pick up that bounce, but I've tried to convince myself of that in cases when we were the game coming out in this quarter. And I think it's something that's pretty hard to predict and pretty hard to steer into. While it has happened, and I've seen it happen, it isn't something that I love. So this quarter remains the quarter I think has the biggest problems. Spending is less, it's hard to market into this quarter, and potentially your organization is very distracted. So given the problems, why do games end up here? Why do you see in some years so many games shipping in March if there are so many problems with this quarter? The major reason is because of the fiscal system that those publishers are operating under. EA, Ubisoft, their fiscal year end is at the end of March. So if they want to book revenue in that fiscal year, the game needs to come out. And often they've built their planning around that, and they don't want to move their revenue out of the fiscal year. It can be problematic. It can make their revenue look like it's inconsistent or bouncing around. So for that reason, you can kind of see why maybe actually Activision having their fiscal year end at the calendar year end makes a lot of sense, because it encourages them to ship games in the holiday season as opposed to this weaker quarter that comes right afterwards. But it does give a bit of a safety valve. So if you're EA or you're Ubisoft, you aim for holiday and you can slide into this other fiscal quarter. If you're Activision, you aim at holiday, there's a brick wall on December 31st, because that's your fiscal year end. You run a greater risk of potentially shipping games that aren't ready because there isn't anywhere to go. Is that real? There's truth there. It's just hard to really predict what the consequence would be, because I could see the argument being that if you're aiming at Q3 and you're really not ready, you'll fail right across the fiscal boundary, which is probably actually what you want. Whereas if you have that last remaining quarter to slide into, you slide into that quarter, it still might not be enough time. So now it's a double whammy. It's a bad quarter and the game still isn't ready. I think there is an argument for lining the fiscal year up with the calendar year because it puts the most important quarter as well as the quarter line that you cannot cross. But there are some other reasons why you might ship in this quarter. If you're a big giant game like Zelda, then you don't care. you ship whenever you want because you're going to do fine. You don't have to worry about what quarter you come out in, which is why looking at games like Zelda or looking at games like the Rockstar games and trying to figure out what the quarters mean based upon their performance can be very suspect because they get to set their own release dates and the market will follow them wherever they go. April, May, June is a quarter that I think has a lot of opportunity. You've seen Rockstar do really amazing in this quarter. Sometimes you hear it talked about as dads and grads because this is when people graduate. This is also when people are looking to pick something up that they might play over the summer. So there's a lot of opportunity in this quarter. For EA and Ubisoft, this is their Q1. So you do run that problem of it might be difficult to get the organization to spend money marketing you in the previous quarter because it's in a different fiscal year, and often organizations are reluctant to spend money across fiscal years. But I do think this quarter has a lot of interesting possibilities. Because this quarter is the first quarter for EA and Ubisoft, there actually aren't a ton of games that ship in this quarter. You see a lot of those games forced to ship in the quarter before, which is that Q4 quarter for them. So you actually have a potential opportunity to be relatively alone in this quarter. So if you're pretty small, this is a quarter to potentially consider. People are still paying attention to gaming, but there might not be a lot of stuff coming out against you as there would be in other quarters. Though one thing you do have to remember about this quarter is this is the quarter that E3 is in. So you might be one of the few games that is coming out, but there might be a ton of very loud news that might drown out your attempted marketing. But if you're early enough in the quarter, I think you're probably fine. And then making our way around the final year, then you get into July, August, September, which is Q1 for Microsoft, as it turns out, but Q2 for Ubisoft and EA, and Q3 for Activision. This is, in a lot of ways, the quarter for sports games. Most of EA sports games ship in this quarter or just at the very beginning of the next quarter. This is an interesting quarter because you have the opportunity to release, then discount yourself going into Christmas, or maybe not even discount yourself. So you might be able to get yourself two little humps of sales. You get a sales jump as you launch, and then another sales as you get into the holiday buying season. At EA, it's a difficult quarter because you're up against the marketing organization, which is just running like crazy to sell and market the sports titles, which are all coming out all at once in a very short period of time. But if you're not part of EA, I think there's some interesting opportunities potentially in this quarter. Sales do tend to be lower on a lot of games in the summer because people might have bought something in that previous quarter, the dads and grads quarter, and also people go away and do other things in the summer if they are students. They might just be missing as a potential audience. It's not a quarter without its problems. I know that I've kind of almost got this knee-jerk reaction to that first quarter in the calendar year because of my experiences with dealing with it. Honestly, I do think it matters less than it used to because games remain available on digital platforms for longer and buying decisions are made in sort of different ways, and Christmas isn't quite as important as it used to be. But I do still think that Christmas is your best quarter and that April, May, June is your second best quarter, with the first quarter in the calendar year and that middle quarter in the summer having more problems than the other two. Depending on what size of game you are, you might want to try to work your way around the other games that are coming out in a year. That being said, things move all the time, so playing chicken on dates doesn't really help anyone out. Often you're just better off shipping when you're done and dealing with the reality of the quarter that you're shipping in. A special thanks to my members. They provide the resources that this channel needs to keep running. If you're interested in becoming a member, there's a link to that down in the description. If you found this interesting, give it a thumbs up because that will signal to YouTube that it's worth sharing with other people. We have a merch store now. I'm currently wearing the File It All and Let Triage Sorted Out. If you're interested in picking up some merch, there's a shelf below this video as well. What do you think? Do you think quarters are even relevant anymore? Is it just a vestige of an older time when retail dominated everything? Let me know that down in the comments. We can have a conversation about it. I will see you again soon. Thank you.